Let's start the show. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. Let's make it 7 in 2020. But enough of me. I'm here for you. On this episode of the FB Show, we are continuing our All-32 NFL team preview series, taking a look at every NFL team through the lens of fantasy football. Today, we wrap up the AFC South with the Houston Texans. But before we get started, 3 quick things from you. First off, smash that subscribe button, power running back style so you never miss a video. Secondly, hit that like button down below like an open receiver downfield, Patrick Mahomes style. Whoa, I just hit the mic there. Hope I didn't hurt your ears. My bad. And last but not least, shoot me a text, 330-302-1554. That is going to be my source for all of my personalized fantasy football content. I can interact with you on a one-to-one basis there and give you more extended and detailed answers for any fantasy questions that you might have, or if you just want to have a simple conversation over there. That is the best way to do it. But if not, if that's not your style, you can always hit me up on all social media platforms at FFVulture, and of course the website is ffvulture.com. Let's get into it. I'm excited. This is the team that has a lot of different fantasy pieces, and I really don't know what some of the value on this team is going to be. So we're just going to talk through it, and let's just make it happen. But we have to start off with the quarterback position because, my goodness, Deshaun Watson has the biggest test of his career. We're going to find out this season just how good Deshaun Watson actually is, and I think he's going to be pretty damn good. I think he's going to keep the train going. So in 2019, his finish in 2019 rather was quarterback 5. He had 10 games as a wide receiver, 10 games as a quarterback 1, 3 games as a quarterback 2, and 2 games as a quarterback 3. 333 completions on 495 pass attempts, 3,800 yards, 413 rushing yards, 33 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. All of that on 10 games played, so it's really safe to say he's going to throw the ball for over 500 times. He's going to throw for over 4,000 yards, and he could probably get you 35 touchdowns every single year. His adjusted score, 22.13 points per game, 15 games played, and his new finish, if he were to play all 16 games, would have been quarterback 2. So he actually moves up in the rankings quite a bit. He actually would have beaten out Patrick Mahomes last season, which is kind of wild, right? But as far as this year goes, and the reason why I'm really mixed upon Deshaun Watson is what happens when he loses one of the best wide receivers in football, right? DeAndre Hopkins gets traded this offseason in a WTF moment, maybe of the past 5 years, as far as the NFL goes. So what does Watson do? What does his outlook look like? For me, I still have Watson ranked high. I have him ranked as quarterback 5, but it is one spot below his ADP, and that's just because I expect the numbers to dip because you lose a top 5, top 3, top 2, top 1 wide receiver in the NFL, right? This isn't rocket science. This is basically taking away who do I want to use here? This is basically being Golden State, and then you take away either KD, Steph, or Clay, right? That's essentially what happened here. So what does this offense look like when you take out a superstar from that team? And not only just a superstar, but it's not like DeAndre Hopkins was a running back who you're just going to feed the ball 300 times to. No, we're talking about the connection, the actual recipient of all of Deshaun Watson's production, right? So that just has me a little bit concerned. Honestly, though, there are enough weapons, and I do expect Deshaun Watson to be good enough to keep it rolling. I'm just kind of tempering my expectations just a little bit this season. So I have him ranked as quarterback 5. I believe the quarterbacks I have ahead of him I have Dak ahead of him, I have Russ ahead of him, and then I have Mahomes and Lamar. In terms of ADP, the person who Russ is behind him. So in ADP it goes Lamar, Mahomes, Dak, and then Deshaun. Deshaun in the 5th is actually a bit more appealing to me than maybe a Dak in the 4th or a Mahomes in the 2nd. I've already kind of explained my thoughts on Lamar. I think this is the 1 year where we're going Lamar early kind of makes sense. But if you were to kind of gauge the system as to when you were to take a quarterback, if you're trying to kind of avoid the first wave and maybe jump in on the second one, I think Deshaun's really interesting because of the fact that he is going in the 5th round. So you can kind of start your draft and you can get your core players like just good and ready to go. So whether that is 3 wide receivers and a running back, or 3 running backs and a wide receiver, or you split them 2-2, right? So then you go 2-2-1. And so you just have your top 5 players essentially filled out to start your draft like that. I think that's very intriguing. But overall for Deshaun this year, my final thoughts are just, hey, I expected him to put up numbers. I don't think they're going to be the same as what we've seen in the past, but the rushing upside's still high with over 400 rushing yards. That number is probably going to go up. There's a chance that he goes for over 500 just because he's going to have to scramble a little bit more because he doesn't have that safety blanket that is DeAndre Hopkins. And he's going to have to spread the ball around just a little bit more, so that may dip the yardage totals just a bit. But overall, I'm kind of in on Deshaun, especially at this draft price. I think it's very comfortable. I don't think it's too high because you aren't taking him, top 3. You can kind of get him in that 4, 5, 6 range, depending on how your draft sees guys like Dak or Kyler or Russ. So Deshaun Watson, there is a chance that Deshaun Watson can actually be kind of about a sneaky value in your drafts, depending on what the QB board and how that falls. However, we just spent a little bit talking about DeAndre Hopkins, and now we need to talk about the man coming over to the Houston Texans, and that is David Johnson. David Johnson and his monster contract make their way to the state of Texas, where there is no state income tax. You'll love to see that for a guy who just got the bag recently. So in 2019, David Johnson finished as running back 37 in standard, running back 38 in PPR. And it was a very up and down year for David Johnson. And the reason why I say that, right, is because you'll probably hear a lot of people say things like David Johnson was terrible last season, and David Johnson underperformed and he undermet expectations, and then he was benched, right? So these are things that are all true, but what I really want to point out is what David Johnson did before he got hurt and before he really just took that slide toward the back half of the season when they traded for Kenyon Drake and David Johnson was pretty much phased out of Cliff Kingsbury's system. David Johnson, the first 6 weeks of the season, all 5 games, or 5 of 6 games as a running back 1. And then just the nosedive happened after that. So David Johnson was great. He was unbelievable for fantasy to start the season, but then things just took a turn for the worse due to the injury and them trading for Kenyon Drake and Johnson not fully fitting the Cardinals' new system. So it was a tough thing for Johnson last season, but if you just remember the first half of the year, he was really, really good for your fantasy team, and that's why I really like his ADP right now, because nobody is remembering that. You look at the games played, the adjusted score rather, 13 games played, 9.5 points per game. His new finish would be running back 32, so that's really nothing, but that's the thing, right? That 13 games played is factoring everything, even when maybe he only saw 3 carries or saw extremely limited work in the second half of the season. So we really just have to focus in on what he was doing when he was getting the majority of the work. The numbers that I really like for him are the receptions. 36 receptions last year, and during that limited time span, I'd love to see that. He had more receiving yards than rushing yards, and he's going to make his way into the end zone just because that's kind of what David Johnson does. So David Johnson's ADP is currently running back 22, going at 409. I have him ranked as running back 17, and as I stated when I was talking about Leonard Fournette, there's a world where David Johnson probably finishes higher, and I think it's a very real possibility, but I'll say it again. It's a very bold take, it's a very proud take as well. There are a lot of good NFL running backs. I know. Deep breaths, stay calm. I know it's a very, very scary statement, but there are. So having him ranked as running back 17, even I kind of think about that, and it's like, hey, I feel like I may be too low, but then you go through the list, and it's like, oh, do I move David Johnson ahead of Todd Gurley? Do I move David Johnson ahead of Chris Carson? James Conner? You just start naming these guys, And it becomes a little bit more complicated trying to slot guys in. So the players that I have above David Johnson are Todd. Then this is 13 through 16. So Todd Gurley, Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, Chris Carson, David Johnson. There's a world where I'm still trying to figure out exactly how I feel about Nick Chubb, because I feel like I can continuously slide him down, even though I know Nick Chubb is a super talented running back. I just don't know what that Browns offense is going to look like. But we're going to talk. I already talked about that in my Browns video, so you can go ahead and watch that. Link will be somewhere either on the upper part of the screen or in the description down below. But back to David Johnson, right? Here is why I'm in on David Johnson, and it's pretty simple. One, they lost DeAndre Hopkins. And there has been multiple studies done. I know, I believe it's Mike Wright of the Footballers points this out quite often. Whenever a team loses a massive, whenever the team loses a player who previously had a massive target share, the next year, the person who usually gets awarded those targets is the running back. Why? I'm not sure. But so that boosts David Johnson's just receiving work. Theoretically, that's going to boost David Johnson's receiving work. So that's great because, as I just said, he had 36 receptions and limited work last year. So David Johnson could easily catch 50 balls this season. Number two, they traded for him, right? They traded a superstar for David Johnson, who is making a butt ton of money. And so because of that, now that they are taking on his massive salary, you can't just bench him, right? So I expect him to get a full workload this season, kind of RIP to Duke Johnson. I really considered doing a Duke Johnson player profile, but I didn't see the point after just thinking about this through. It's David Johnson is going to be the one to get all the work. And then number three, Carlos Hyde last season in this offense. Like, Carlos Hyde is kind of washed, just a very, very standard or very average NFL running back. He finished as an RB3. I want to say he was close. Did he finish as an RB3 or was it an RB2? Let's see. He finished as... Yes, so Carlos Hyde finished in this offense as running back 27. I'm going to say that David Johnson is a better running back in the NFL than Carlos Hyde. So that, now, like, to me, like, that's just one of those things where it just naturally makes sense to have him multiple spots higher because I just believe in the talent. And this offense is going to score a lot of points. That's it. Like, David Johnson, I'm all in. This draft price is an absolute steal. I just look at it and it's just like, what are we doing? Who's he going around? That's who I'm curious in. David Johnson is going around. Okay. So this is Melvin Gordon, Devin Singletary, James Conner, Mark Ingram. And then David Montgomery is directly after. This just feels obvious. Definitely over Melvin Gordon. Definitely over Devin Singletary. I have him ranked above James Conner, and I believe I have Mark Ingram below him as well. But I've already talked about Mark Ingram, and I just think Mark Ingram is also a value this season. But regardless, give me all of David Johnson at this draft price, who can easily surpass his ADP because he's going to get the ball 275 times, plus receiving work, plus in an offense that moves the ball and scores, and he's just due to get he's just due to get on the field because of the contract that he signed and what they're paying him this season. Let's shift over to the wide receivers and the pass catchers now. Now, the thing about the Texans pass catchers there's a lot of them. I don't know if you know this. They have Will Fuller. They signed Brandin Cooks. They signed Randall Cobb. And they still have Kenny Stills. So trying to figure out which guys I wanted to do player profiles of was a little bit difficult because I do think all four of these guys could have some value. But ultimately, what I based my decision off of was who was being drafted, right? Who are the guys that you are most likely to draft instead of guys that maybe you start and plug in just on random weeks of the season. Like you pick them off the waiver wire. You pick them off the waiver wire when you're injury ridden or you have bye weeks, right? So I really wanted to eliminate those guys. And those two guys for me were Randall Cobb and Kenny Stills. So we're only going to be talking about Will Fuller and Brandin Cooks. But the things I just want to bring up quickly about those two players. Kenny Stills, like we've always waited and we've been waiting for this reemergence of his career and it just hasn't happened yet. he was meh last year. Like, we all thought he would have an opportunity, and he really didn't do a whole lot with it. Randall Cobb's a little bit more interesting. Randall Cobb's probably going to be playing in the slot after the Kiki Kuti experiment crashed and burned last season. And Randall Cobb, I believe, had 88 targets in Dallas last season. Was it 88? Let me verify that. I want to say it was 88 because him and Jason Witten, I believe, had the same amount of targets. Let's see. Randall Cobb. Yeah, so Randall Cobb last season had 83 targets and 55 catches. In Dallas last year, he had over 800 yards. So if you're just looking for maybe a slot PPR guy in the very, very late round of your draft, if you are playing in a deeper league, Randall Cobb's just a player to keep in mind just because he is going to see the field in 3 wide receiver sets. But let's just start talking about Will Fuller and Brandin Cooks. Will Fuller, oh baby, I got thoughts on Will Fuller. 2019 finish, wide receiver 53 in standard, 54 in PPR. Let's see. He had 2 games as a wide receiver 1, 0 games as a 2, 0 games as a 3, 71 targets, 49 catches, 670 yards, and 3 touchdowns, 10 points per game, 11 games played in a new finish of wide receiver 41. Will Fuller has the opportunity to cement himself into the number 1 option on this offense as far as receivers go. I don't think he's going to do it. I don't think we've seen what Will Fuller can do. And he's also, I talked about this with A.J. Brown, like all it takes for him is one play and he'll give you a 50-yard touchdown and that's all you need for the week. But it doesn't come consistently enough. But the thing is like that being said, whenever Will Fuller is on the field, he seems to put up fantasy points, but he's just not on the field enough because he's basically made of glass. Unfortunately, he's a very fragile player. And because of that, I'm not sure how in I am on him. Luckily enough, he's only going in the 8th round, so he's going to be maybe your 4th or 5th wide receiver at that point. So what you can do is if you just stack up, with consistency and just constant production early on, maybe you start off your draft with Devontae Adams, and then later on you draft who am I even thinking of? Let's say you start your draft like Devontae Adams, and in the 3rd or 4th round you take Robert Woods, and now you're looking for your 3rd or 4th wide receiver. Will Fuller is an interesting option just because you have those first 2 guys clearly cemented as your 1 and 2, and so you kind of have that flexibility to take gambles or take shots on players in that 8th round and that mid-round range. Will Fuller kind of fits that bill. But to me, I just want to see what this offense looks like in terms of passing. Right? I know what David Johnson's going to do. I know that Deshaun Watson's going to put up numbers. I just don't know who those numbers are going to go to. And so I'm kind of waiting. I'm very hesitant for all Texans wide receivers right now. His ADP is currently wide receiver 35, as I said, in the 8th round. I have him ranked also wide receiver 35, and it's just one of those, I just don't know what to do with him. I don't know what to do with him. He's made of glass. When he's on the field, he's great. But if he's going to miss 5 games every single year and potentially bust in a few games where he doesn't get that 50-yard touchdown, like what can you do? Whenever you start Will Fuller, I don't know if you've ever played the game, what is it? Bean Boozled, where you have the different flavor jelly beans. One's a good flavor and one's a bad flavor, and you just have to pick one and you hope it's the good one. I kind of feel that way when trying to start Will Fuller. Right, because you're praying. You're praying for the monster production. You're praying for the 8 targets. You're praying for the 60-yard touchdown bomb. And if you don't get that, you're probably snake bitten. And that's just a very, very scary feeling. So that being I'm trying to mentally convince myself to be in on Will Fuller because this offense is losing 135 targets due to the Hopkins loss. So they have to go somewhere, right? But if Will Fuller isn't on the field, it doesn't matter. You know, if he's on the field, he's good. I don't know what to do with Will Fuller. If you are on the clock and you are trying to decide between Will Fuller and X, this is actually a fun game. I was going to say, to finish that thought though, if you are on the clock and you're trying to decide Will Fuller or X player, probably flip a coin, honestly. But I want to pull up who I have around Will Fuller being drafted right now. Alright, so I have Brandin Cooks and Will Fuller back-to-back in my rankings. I'll talk about Brandin Cooks in just a moment. I have Michael Gallup ahead of Will Fuller. I have Tyler Boyd ahead of Will Fuller. I have Marvin Jones ahead of Will Fuller. I have Julian Edelman, Hollywood, Jarvis, all ahead of Will Fuller. And then behind him, I have Deebo Samuel. I would rather have 13 weeks of Deebo Samuel than Will Fuller, because I think Deebo's going to miss a few games to start the season. Deontay Johnson versus Will Fuller, that's an interesting conversation. Oh, that's the thing. This gets interesting. I want to bring my mic over as I talk about this, right? So I'm looking at this now, right? And I'm asking myself, Will Fuller or Deontay Johnson? Who do you take there? Probably Will Fuller. Will Fuller or Christian Kirk? Probably Will Fuller. So that's, as we get into Darius Slayton's the next name, right? This is one of the things that I was talking about in, it might have been my first preview with Atlanta, where I was saying you have to ask yourself what's more valuable, the number 2 option on a team on a good offense, or the number 1 option on a different offense. And I'm going to use the word different instead of bad, just because I don't know what this Houston offense is actually going to look like. I have ideas, but I'm still not fully convinced, and I don't know if any of these players are good enough to fully take on that number 1 role. So ultimately, Will Fuller, it's just eat the jelly bean, right? Just eat the jelly bean, swallow it as fast as you can, and hope and pray that you got the good one, right? Now let's talk about the other player in this Houston offense, and that is Brandin Cooks, coming over from the Rams last season. It was not great for Brandin Cooks, and he was basically the odd man out in the Rams offense that was evolving into more 2 wide receiver sets and just a different offensive look entirely, right? They weren't throwing the ball as deep, and that's kind of what Brandin Cooks does. So in 2019, wide receiver finish of 63 in standard, 62 in PPR, 6.9 points per game on 14 games played, a new finish of wide receiver 67. He just wasn't good. I believe he was also a little bit banged up last year as well. That's also kind of a per usual thing, right? Brandin Cooks always for some reason, Brandin Cooks just gets obliterated every single year. Only 72 targets, 42 catches, 583 yards, and 2 touchdowns. 0 games as a 1, 2 games as a 2, 2 games as a 3. His ADP is currently wide receiver 34, going at 709. At 707, excuse me. So he's actually being drafted 1 spot ahead of Will Fuller. I am ranked 1 spot behind Will Fuller. And the reason why I have him 1 spot behind instead of ahead is just because I know Will Fuller and Deshaun Watson have that chemistry. And I'll take that chemistry over a guy just coming into a brand new offense. If I see these 2 players kind of the same way, I'll take the chemistry and the guy who's probably entering year 3 or 4 in this system, compared to the guy who's just getting his feet wet and learning the playbook and developing chemistry with the quarterback. That said, Brandin Cooks to me is a little bit of an interesting target this season because we've seen it consistently from him previously. Brandin Cooks, if I remember correctly, has finished. Brandin Cooks has finished as a wide receiver 2. I believe it's multiple times. Brandin Cooks fantasy finishes. So the thing that we have to remember, right? Brandin Cooks was the 3rd option in the Rams offense, and he was still, I believe it was 2018. 2018, he finished as the wide receiver 18, I think it was. They had 3 players finish in the top 18 at the wide receiver position. Hang on. I wanna see. Do they give me? Does Fantasy Pros give me my history? Okay. No, that ain't right. Let's see. I really don't. All right, Fantasy Pros, listen. I know you're listening to me because you listen to all my podcasts. You need the option where I can see a player's fantasy finishes entirely. Okay. This doesn't help me. Let's see. Fantasy data? If they don't got it, oh, do I have it? I might have it. This is. I don't need his font. I need his finish. Fantasy. All right. Nope. Yeah, that doesn't help me either. Thanks, guys. All right. This is really interesting. All right, note to self. Note to self. Be the fantasy outlet that actually tracks everything for every player, and then everyone will come to your website and it will be great. You'll boom. You'll explode. Your business will explode. Whoops, wrong thing. All right, back to Brandin Cooks though. Brandin Cooks, basically, the point of the story is this: Brandin Cooks has already shown potential, and he's done it time and time again, where he finishes as a top 24 wide receiver. He's entering a brand new offense, which you don't like that. But in that offense, as we just talked about, they lost DeAndre Hopkins, who now opens up 135 targets to just players in general, right? So where those targets go, I don't know. I love the talent of Brandin Cooks, but the injury concerns are also a thing with him. Like I said, he just tends to get banged up throughout the season. But just the thing that is appealing is that I know for a fact he's done it before in a good offense. This is going to be a good offense. I just don't know how this is going to shake out. So, while I understand, if you put a gun to my head, can I say that? Can I say that in 2020? If you put a gun to my head and you tell me Brandin Cooks or Will Fuller, I'm probably going to say Brandin Cooks. But I understand why you might think Will Fuller. Basically, I'm done trying to figure out this game. The honest answer is I'm not leaning towards either of these players. I know one of them has to be good. I'm just not I'm willing to be I guess wrong about both of these guys. Just I don't want anything to do with them. If you need to take one, fine, do it, but I don't have interest in trying to play this coin flip game. I understand I have a 50-50 shot, but it's just I would rather have a few other wide receivers going in that same tier. So that's where I stand on the Texans' backwards-ass wide receiver core. Just, good God. Send help, please. All the help. However, one player that I am intrigued by, that's the right word I want to use, is Darren Fells, the Texans tight end. Darren Fells used to play for the Cardinals, and we were always just waiting for him to kind of break out and become a fantasy-relevant tight end consistently, week in, week out starter. In 2019, he finished as tight end 13 in standard and 15 in PPR. When you look at the adjusted score, that really doesn't help his case. 5.8 points per game, 16 games played, new finish of tight end 28. Somehow he makes that awful of a jump. But I really want to talk about the weekly finishes. He had 4 games as a tight end 1. As we said before, that's really good. 5 games as a tight end 2. We don't love that. That's outside the top 12, and for only starting 1, you don't he probably didn't kill you those weeks, but he didn't help you either. And then he had 1 game in a tight end 3, and that's honestly we can just throw that away because that's trash. But what I want to talk about is his stats from 2019. 48 targets, only 48, 34 catches, so that's a pretty good catch rate. 341 yards. That yardage number is a little bit low, but he also had 7 touchdowns. And that's kind of the point. Darren Fells has developed a really good red zone chemistry with Deshaun Watson. And now that we take away Hopkins, he's going to need someone else to throw the ball to in the red zone. And I think we see more Darren Fells this season. Another year in the offense. He has this connection with Deshaun. There's 135 targets for the 4th time this episode. 135 targets have to go somewhere. So I'm really intrigued by Darren Fells, and nobody's talking about him. And I think that's why I am intrigued, because I feel like, not to sound too pompous, but I feel like I'm in on something that other people aren't. But I'm going to say that even though I have him ranked at tight end 25 plus, he's outside my top 24, and he's not being drafted at all. He's going outside tight end 25 and outside the 14th round in ADP. That's as far back as my ADP goes. But there's a world. There's a world for me where Darren Fells finishes the season as a tight end 1. And maybe I need to actually make my rankings reflect that. But like I said, I'm just more intrigued. And I'm just really thinking about it more than anything. So I don't know where I'm officially taking my stance, or if I'm planting my flag on Darren Fells, but I see how it happens. And I think you've heard this. I think you hear the change in my voice, where I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking about it, and it's this makes sense, right? I mean, he was really good when he was on the field last season, and I think it was towards the back half of the year If I remember correctly, it was towards the back half of the year when he really started to shine. I could be wrong about that. I'm going to pull it up right now. Let's see. All right, so it was kind of all over the place. It was actually more so the early part of the season. Through weeks 3 through 8 is where he had all 4 of his wide receiver or all 4 of his tight end 1 finishes, and then kind of throughout the rest of the season, he was pretty much a tight end 2. But regardless, right? Actually, what I'm really curious about is, do those games match up with Will Fuller being absent? Let's take a look here. Let's pull Will Fuller up again, because I do think that's really that could be interesting. Because if we know that Will Fuller is going to miss games, then who's to say that Darren Fells will not be the guy to own? So let's go to 2019. All right, so Will Fuller did play in those games. Gotcha. Just something to note. Good to know. All right. I think that's it, though. That was really just like the final. I considered if I even wanted to make a Darren Fells profile, but as I was like just going through it, it was just like, this guy might be sneaky. He might be the guy that everybody's just missing on, and you might have something here. So if you are just waiting and you're punting tight end and you're just taking one in the last round, Fells honestly might not be a bad option, because there is to me, there's just the clear path, especially with how murky this wide receiver room is. Like, yes, there's a lot of talent, but how it shakes out, again, we don't know. So if you want to just kind of take a guy who can just be the streaky touchdown-oriented player, I think Fells might be that player for you at the tight end position. So that's going to do it for our Houston Texans All-32 NFL team preview. Just breaking down every single team through the lens of fantasy football. The Texans, there's so much talent. Like, that's the thing about this Texans team. Dude, there's so much talent on this squad. But what Bill O'Brien does, and of course Bill O'Brien's the wild card, right? But what Bill O'Brien does with it is going to remain to be seen. I love David Johnson. I think the value's there. There is the case for Deshaun. I see how, especially if he is going, as QB 5 or 6. Like, if you want to kind of take like that mid-round value that I think is there, makes sense to me. How you see these wide receivers shaking out, truth be told, I'm gonna leave that to you. I'm going to leave that to you because I have no idea what to do with either of them. I see the potentials for each one, and they kind of contradict each other, which is really funny. Just depending on how you break it down. And last but not least, with Darren Fells, I see the path. I see the path. Just, do I choose to go down it? I don't know yet, but I see how it happens for him to finish as a top 12 tight end, and nobody is talking about him. He's one of my favorite sleepers for the season. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. We're doing this thing every single day as we try and crank out these team previews, so be sure to subscribe for that. Once again, like this video and shoot me a text. This way. There you go. Shoot me a text. 330-302-1554. My source for all of my fantasy information this season. Follow me on all social media at FFVulture. And of course, the website is ffvulture.com. And remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. Later.